The rain fell in sheets across the muddy street of Walla Walla, Washington, turning the main road into a river of brown sludge that swallowed wagon wheels and boot heels alike. And Vincent Orson had seen plenty of misery in his 32 years riding the Western Territories. But nothing quite prepared him for the sight of the woman kneeling in that mud, her black dress soaked through, her hands pressed into the mire, as if she were trying to dig her way into the earth itself. He had ridden into town that April morning of 1878 with nothing but his horse, his saddle, and a worn leather satchel containing everything he owned in this world. The cattle drive from Texas had ended badly, half the herd lost to rustlers and disease, and the ranch owner had paid what little he could before selling off what remained. Vincent had taken his meager wages and pointed his horse north, hearing that the railroad was hiring guards and the wheat farms around Walla Walla needed experienced hands. He was tired of drifting, tired of sleeping under stars that offered no answers, tired of waking up alone with nothing but the weight of his own thoughts. But when he saw her there, collapsed in the middle of the street, while townsfolk hurried past with their heads down and their collars up against the rain, something in his chest tightened like a fist. She was not crying, not calling out, just kneeling there as if the world had stopped turning and left her behind. Her dark hair hung in wet ropes around her face, and her shoulders shook, though whether from cold or grief, he could not tell. Vincent dismounted without thinking, his boots splashing into the mud as he approached. The rain hammered against his hat, running off the brim in a steady stream. He crouched beside her, close enough to see that her hands were bleeding, the knuckles scraped raw from something, and her face was pale as milk beneath the grime. "Madam," he said quietly, his voice nearly lost in the rain. "Madam, you cannot stay here." She did not look at him. Her eyes were fixed on nothing, staring into the mud as if searching for something she had lost and would never find again. Up close, he could see she was young, perhaps 24 or 25, with fine features that spoke of better days. The black dress marked her as a widow, and the way she held herself, so utterly still and broken, told him the loss was recent. "Madam," he tried again, reaching out to touch her shoulder gently, "you will catch your death out here." This time she moved, her head turning slowly toward him. Her eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds, and they were hollow in a way that made his heart ache. She looked at him as if he were a stranger from another world, someone speaking a language she no longer understood. "Your heart's still beating," Vincent said, surprised by the roughness in his own voice. "That's enough. That's enough to stand up." For a long moment, she simply stared at him. Then something shifted in those gray eyes, some tiny spark of recognition, or perhaps just exhaustion. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Vincent did not wait for permission. He slipped his arms under hers and lifted her to her feet, feeling how light she was, how fragile, as if grief had hollowed her out from the inside. She swayed against him, and he steadied her, his hands firm on her arms. "Where can I take you?" he asked. "Do you have family here?" She shook her head slowly, the movement almost dreamlike. Her voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. "The boarding house. Mrs. Callahan's." Vincent nodded, recognizing the name. He had passed the place on his way into town, a 2-story building with peeling white paint and a sign that advertised rooms by the week. He kept one arm around her waist, supporting most of her weight, and retrieved his horse's reins with the other hand. The gelding followed docilely as Vincent guided the woman through the mud, her feet moving mechanically, as if her body remembered how to walk even when her mind had gone somewhere else entirely. The boarding house was only 3 buildings down, but it felt like miles. By the time they reached the porch, Vincent was soaked through, his shirt clinging to his back, his pants heavy with water and mud. He helped her up the steps, which creaked under their combined weight, and pushed open the door without knocking. The warmth inside hit him like a wave, and with it came the smell of bread baking and coffee brewing. A stout woman with gray hair pinned in a tight bun looked up from behind a desk, her expression shifting from annoyance at the intrusion to concern when she saw who he carried. "Lord have mercy, is that Flora Lawson?" "Mrs.?" Callahan rushed forward, her hands fluttering. "Oh, that poor child. I heard about Thomas passing, but I did not know she had taken it so hard. Bring her upstairs, young man. Second door on the right." Vincent carried Flora up the narrow staircase, his boots leaving muddy prints on the worn runner. Mrs. Callahan hurried ahead, opening the door to a small room with a brass bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out over the street. The wallpaper was faded but clean, and someone had placed a vase of dried flowers on the windowsill. He laid Flora on the bed as gently as he could. She curled onto her side immediately, drawing her knees up, her eyes closing. Mrs. Callahan was already pulling blankets from a chest, clicking her tongue against her teeth. 3 days ago, it was, she said, more to herself than to Vincent. Thomas Lawson took sick with pneumonia and was gone within a week. They had only been married 8 months, poor lambs. She came from back east, you know, answered one of those matrimonial advertisements. He was a good man, worked at the flour mill, had a little house all ready for her. Then God saw fit to take him, and here she is, alone in a strange place with no family and no prospects. Vincent stood awkwardly by the door, water dripping from his clothes onto the floor. He should leave, let the woman tend to Flora, but his feet seemed rooted to the spot. He watched as Mrs. Callahan removed Flora's muddy shoes and covered her with quilts, tucking them around her with practiced efficiency. Will she be all right? The question came out before he could stop it. Mrs. Callahan looked at him with eyes that had seen too much suffering to offer easy comfort. In body, perhaps. In spirit? She shook her head. That girl has had her heart broken clean in 2. It takes more than blankets and hot soup to mend that. Vincent nodded slowly, understanding more than he wanted to. He had seen men broken by loss before, soldiers during the war who had watched their brothers die, ranchers who had lost everything to drought or disease. Some found their way back to themselves, others never did. I will come back tomorrow, he heard himself say, to see if she needs anything. Mrs. Callahan studied him with shrewd eyes, taking in his worn clothes, his weathered face, the way he held his hat in his hands like a schoolboy. You are new in town. Yes, madam, Vincent Orson. I am looking for work. Well, Mr. Orson, if you are looking for charity cases, you have found one. But Flora Lawson has nothing to offer you, not even thanks. Her husband left her with debts to pay off, and she barely has 2 coins to rub together. I am not looking for payment, Vincent said quietly. I just want to make sure she is all right. The older woman's expression softened slightly. Then you are either a fool or a good man, and I have not decided which yet. Come by tomorrow if you like, but do not expect much. That girl is drowning in grief, and sometimes people need to sink all the way to the bottom before they can push themselves back up. Vincent left the boarding house with those words echoing in his mind. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the street was emptying as people retreated to their homes and businesses. He found a stable for his horse and paid for a week's board, then took a room at a different boarding house on the edge of town, one that catered to drifters and railroad workers. The room was tiny and smelled of mildew, but it had a bed and a door that locked, which was more than he had enjoyed in months. That night, he lay awake listening to the rain tap against the window, thinking about gray eyes and muddy hands, and the way Flora had looked at him, as if he were the only solid thing in a world that had turned to water. He did not know why he cared, why he had stopped when so many others had walked past. Perhaps it was because he understood something about being alone, about feeling like the ground had opened up beneath your feet and there was nothing left to hold on to. Or perhaps it was simpler than that. Perhaps it was because when he had lifted her from the mud, when he had felt the flutter of her heartbeat against his chest, something in him had recognized something in her. 2 lost souls in a storm, reaching for each other in the dark. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of day that made yesterday's storm seem like a dream. Vincent washed in cold water from the basin, shaved carefully with his straight razor, and put on his cleanest shirt. He told himself he was being foolish, that the woman probably would not even remember him. But he went to Mrs. Callahan's boarding house anyway, his hat in his hands and his heart beating faster than it should. Mrs. Callahan answered his knock with a weary expression. She has not left her room, she said without preamble, has not eaten, has not spoken. I am worried, Mr. Orson. I have seen grief before, but this is something different. May I see her? The landlady hesitated, then nodded. Perhaps a fresh face will do her good, or at least do no harm. Come. She led him upstairs again, her keys jangling at her waist. The door to Flora's room was closed, and Mrs. Callahan knocked softly before opening it. Flora, dear, you have a visitor. The gentleman who helped you yesterday? Vincent stepped into the room, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The curtains were drawn, casting everything in shadow. Flora sat in a chair by the window, still wearing the same black dress, now dried and stiff with mud. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, unbrushed, and her hands lay limp in her lap. She did not look up when he entered. "Mrs. Lawson," Vincent said gently, moving closer, "I wanted to see how you were doing." No response. She stared at the wall as if he had not spoken. Mrs. Callahan made a small sound of distress and left the room, closing the door softly behind her. Vincent stood there for a moment, uncertain, then pulled the other chair over and sat down facing Flora. "My name is Vincent Orson," he said, keeping his voice low and even. "I know you do not know me, and you have no reason to care about anything I say, but I am going to talk anyway, if that is all right with you." Still nothing, but she had not told him to leave, so he took that as permission. "I lost someone once," he said, surprising himself with the admission. "Her name was Margaret. We were going to be married, had the whole thing planned. This was back in Missouri before the war. She caught scarlet fever the winter before the wedding, died 3 days before Christmas. I was 19 years old, and I thought my life was over." He paused, the memories rising up sharp and clear despite the years. "For a while, I did not care about anything. Enlisted in the army because I figured if I was going to feel dead inside, I might as well put my body where it could do some good. Fought for 4 years, saw things no man should see, and when it was over, I did not know how to be anything but a soldier. So I drifted. Cattle drives, ranch work, whatever would keep me moving and keep me from thinking too hard." Vincent leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "What I am trying to say is that I understand something about loss, about feeling like the world has no color left in it, like you are just going through motions that do not mean anything anymore. And I am not going to tell you that it gets better, because that is not what you need to hear right now. What I will tell you is that your heart is still beating, and that means something. It means you are still here, even when part of you wishes you were not." For the first time, Flora's eyes moved, just a flicker, a slight turn of her head toward him. He could see her face better now, the delicate bones, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her lips were chapped and pale. "He promised me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He promised we would have a life together. He wrote such beautiful letters. He said he would take care of me, that I would never be alone again." Vincent felt his throat tighten. "I am sure he meant every word. I left everything for him." Tears began to slide down her cheeks, silent and steady. "My family did not approve of me marrying a stranger and moving west. They said I was being foolish, reckless. We fought terribly. I told them I did not need them, that I had Thomas now. I got on the train, and I did not look back. And now he is gone, and I have nothing. No husband, no family, no home. I am completely alone." "You are not alone," Vincent said firmly. "You are here, in this town, and there are people who care about what happens to you." She laughed bitterly. "Like who? Mrs. Callahan, who I owe 3 weeks' rent. The people at the mill who sent their condolences and then immediately asked when I would be clearing out of Thomas's house so they could rent it to the next worker? I am a burden, Mr. Orson. A stranger with no skills and no money, taking up space in a place that was never meant to be mine." "Then we will find you a place that is yours," Vincent said, the words coming out with more conviction than he felt. "You can sew, can you not? Or cook. There must be work in this town for someone willing to do it." Flora shook her head slowly. "I can do needlework, yes. I was taught to paint and play piano, to make polite conversation, and arrange flowers. All the things a proper lady should know. But none of those things matter here, do they? This is not the world I was raised for." Vincent stood up and walked to the window, pulling the curtains open. Sunlight flooded the room, making Flora wince and turn away. "The world does not care what we were raised for," he said. "It only cares what we are willing to become. You can sit in this room and let grief swallow you whole, or you can stand up and figure out how to survive. It is not going to be easy, and it is not going to be pretty, but you can do it." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw anger flash in those gray eyes. Good. Anger was better than emptiness. "How dare you?" she said, her voice stronger now. "You know nothing about me, about what I have lost. You walk in here with your platitudes about survival, as if you have any idea what it is like to lose everything." "You are right," Vincent said, meeting her gaze steadily. I do not know exactly what you are going through. Everyone's pain is their own. But I know what it is like to have to rebuild yourself from nothing. And I know that you have a choice right now, whether you believe it or not. You can choose to keep living, or you can choose to die slowly in this room. But if you choose to live, I will help you. No strings, no expectations. Just help. Flora stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood up on shaky legs, using the chair for support. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Vincent did not have a good answer for that. He could not explain the pull he felt toward her, the sense that their meeting in the mud had been something more than chance. So, he simply told her the truth. "Because yesterday, when I saw you in that street, I saw myself, and I wish someone had stopped to help me when I needed it most." The words hung in the air between them, fragile and honest. Flora's expression softened slightly, the anger draining away to leave only exhaustion. "I do not know if I can do this," she whispered. "You do not have to know," Vincent said. "You just have to try, one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, if you have to." She nodded slowly and he saw her swallow hard, fighting back more tears. "I should eat something," she said finally. "I have not eaten since before the funeral." "That is a start," Vincent said, allowing himself a small smile. "Let us go downstairs and see what Mrs. Callahan has in her kitchen." They made their way down together, Flora moving carefully, as if her body had forgotten how to navigate stairs. Mrs. Callahan fussed over her immediately, settling her at the kitchen table and bringing out bread, cheese, and cold chicken. Flora ate slowly, mechanically, but she ate, and Vincent counted that as a victory. He sat across from her, drinking coffee that was strong enough to strip paint, and watched as some color returned to her cheeks. She was beautiful, he realized, even with grief etched into every line of her face. There was something delicate about her, but also something stubborn in the set of her jaw, the way she forced herself to keep eating even when it clearly pained her. "Tell me about Thomas," he said suddenly. "What was he like?" Flora's hand stilled on her cup. For a moment, he thought he had pushed too far, but then she began to speak. "He was kind, gentle. He loved books and music, though there was not much of either here. He worked hard at the mill, saved every penny so we could build a proper life. He talked about buying land someday, having a farm with apple trees. He wanted children." Her voice broke on the last word. "He sounds like a good man." "He was. He deserved better than to die coughing up blood in a rented house, with only me to hold his hand." Flora set down her cup, her hands trembling. "I could not save him. I tried everything. I sat with him day and night, gave him every medicine the doctor prescribed, prayed until I had no words left. But he just kept getting weaker, and then he was gone." Vincent reached across the table and covered her hand with his. It was a bold gesture, perhaps too familiar, but he felt compelled to offer some comfort. "You did everything you could. Sometimes that is all we can do." She did not pull away. Instead, she looked down at their joined hands, as if surprised to find them there. "You have been very kind to me, Mr. Orson. I do not understand why, but I am grateful. Call me Vincent," he said, "and you do not need to understand. Just accept the help." Over the next few days, Vincent became a regular presence at Mrs. Callahan's boarding house. He would arrive in the mornings with small offerings, fresh bread from the bakery, wildflowers picked from the fields outside town, a book he had borrowed from the general store owner. He would sit with Flora in the parlor or on the front porch, talking about nothing and everything, trying to coax her back into the world of the living. At first she was hesitant, her responses brief and guarded, but gradually she began to open up. She told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, the daughter of a moderately successful merchant who had ideas above his station, how she had been educated at a finishing school, trained to marry well and manage a proper household, how she had spent her teenage years attending parties and reading novels, dreaming of adventure and romance. "I thought answering Thomas's advertisement was the bravest thing I had ever done," she said one afternoon as they sat on the porch watching wagons roll past. "I thought I was being so bold, striking out on my own, but I was just trading one cage for another, was I not? Going from my father's house to my husband's, never truly independent." "You are independent now," Vincent pointed out, "whether you wanted to be or not." Flora made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. "Yes, independent and destitute. What a grand adventure." Vincent had been making inquiries around town, trying to find work for her. The general store owner's wife needed help with sewing and alterations, he had discovered, and the school teacher was looking for someone to assist with the younger children. He presented these options to Flora carefully, not wanting to push too hard. "I could speak to Mrs. Henderson at the store," he said. "She pays fair wages, and the work would be inside, out of the weather." Flora considered this, her fingers tracing patterns on the arm of her chair. "I suppose I have to do something," she said slowly. "Mrs. Callahan has been patient, but I know she needs the money I owe her, and I need to eat." "Then let us go see Mrs. Henderson this afternoon," Vincent suggested. "The worst she can say is no." But Mrs. Henderson did not say no. She was a practical woman in her 50s who took one look at Flora's neat stitches and hired her on the spot. The wages were modest, but they would be enough to pay rent and buy food, which was all Flora needed for now. She would start the next day working in the back room of the store, where bolts of fabric were kept and alterations were done. That evening, Vincent walked Flora back to the boarding house through streets painted gold by the setting sun. She was quieter than usual, her expression pensive. When they reached the porch steps, she turned to him. "I need to ask you something," she said, her gray eyes searching his face. "Why are you doing all of this? And please do not tell me it is just kindness. Men do not do this much for a stranger without wanting something in return." Vincent had been expecting this question, had known it would come eventually. He took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "You are right. I do want something. I want to see you survive. I want to see you find your way through this grief and come out the other side. Not because I expect anything from you, but because I wish someone had wanted that for me when I was drowning. Consider it my way of repaying a debt I never got to repay." Flora studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You are a strange man, Vincent Orson." "I have been called worse," he said with a slight smile. She surprised him by stepping forward and pressing a quick kiss to his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, then turned and hurried inside before he could respond. Vincent stood on the porch for a long time after she left, his hand touching the spot where her lips had been. Something was changing, he realized, something he had not anticipated and was not sure he was ready for. He had come to Walla Walla looking for work and a fresh start, not expecting to find anything more. But Flora was becoming important to him in ways he could not quite name, and the thought both thrilled and terrified him. He had not been interested in another woman since Margaret's death, had not allowed himself to feel anything beyond fleeting attraction. Love was too painful, too risky. It meant giving someone the power to destroy you, and he had already been destroyed once. He was not sure he could survive it again. But as the days turned into weeks, he found it harder and harder to keep his distance. Flora was working at the store now, her hands busy with needle and thread, her mind occupied with measurements and seams. The work seemed to be good for her. She stood straighter, spoke more, even managed a genuine smile occasionally when a customer complimented her work. Vincent had found employment as well, hired on at one of the wheat farms outside town. The work was backbreaking, clearing fields and mending fences, but it paid decently and kept him close to Walla Walla. He would ride into town every few days, timing his visits to coincide with Flora's breaks from the store. They would walk together, talking easily now, the initial awkwardness between them fading into something that felt almost like friendship. Almost, but not quite. Because there were moments when their hands would brush and neither of them would pull away, when their eyes would meet and hold for just a beat too long, when the air between them would seem to crackle with something unspoken. It was Flora who finally acknowledged what was happening between them. They were sitting by the creek on the edge of town, watching the water flow past, when she said quietly, "I think about Thomas every day. I wonder what he would think of all this, of me working and surviving and slowly starting to feel like a person again." "He would be proud of you," Vincent said. "Any man would be." Flora turned to look at him, her expression serious. "I also wonder what he would think about you. About us." Vincent's heart began to beat faster. "There is no us, Flora. I am just a friend helping you through a difficult time." "Is that all?" she asked softly. "Because it does not feel like that to me. Not anymore." He wanted to deny it, to maintain the safe distance he had been trying to preserve, but he could not lie to her. "No," he admitted, "that is not all. But I do not want to push you into something you are not ready for. You are still grieving, still healing." "I will always be grieving," Flora said, her voice steady. "Thomas is gone, and nothing will change that. But you were right when you said, my heart is still beating. It is still beating, and it is starting to remember what it feels like to want things again. To want connection and companionship, and maybe, someday, something more. Vincent reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. We have time, he said. There is no rush. We can take this as slow as you need. Flora squeezed his hand, and when she smiled, it reached her eyes for the first time since he had known her. I would like that, she said. I would like that very much. Summer came to Walla Walla with scorching heat and cloudless skies. The wheat fields turned golden, and the harvest began, pulling every able-bodied person into the work. Vincent spent long days in the sun, his back aching and his hands blistered, but he did not mind. The work was honest and the pay was good, and at the end of each week, he would ride into town and spend his free afternoon with Flora. She had settled into her new life with a determination that amazed him. She had paid off her debts to Mrs. Callahan and moved into a tiny room above the general store, which came with her employment. She had made friends with some of the other young women in town, attended church on Sundays, and was slowly becoming part of the community. She still wore black, still carried her grief with her, but it no longer defined her entirely. Their relationship deepened slowly, carefully, like roots growing deep into soil. They held hands when they walked. He kissed her forehead when he said goodbye. She leaned against him when they sat together, fitting naturally into the curve of his arm. They talked about everything, their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Flora told him about the books she loved and the places she wanted to see. Vincent told her about the war, about the things he had seen and done, trusting her with pieces of himself he had never shared with anyone. Do you ever think about settling down? Flora asked him one evening in the late August. They were watching the sunset from a hilltop outside town, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. Having a permanent home instead of drifting from place to place. I think about it more lately, Vincent admitted. I used to believe I was not suited for that kind of life, that I was too restless, too damaged by the war and everything that came after. But being here, with you, it makes me wonder if I was wrong, if maybe I just had not found the right reason to stay. Flora looked at him, her expression tender. I want to build something here, she said. A real life, not just survival. I want a home, maybe a small business of my own someday. I want to feel like I belong somewhere. She paused, then added quietly, and I want you to be part of that, if you are willing. Vincent turned to face her fully, his heart pounding. Flora, I need you to be sure. I am not a wealthy man. I have no grand prospects, no family name or property to offer you. I am just a cowboy who has spent most of his life drifting. Are you certain that is what you want? I do not need wealth or grand prospects, Flora said firmly. I need honesty and kindness, and someone who sees me as more than just a decorative object or a tragic figure to be pitied. You have given me all of that and more. You helped me find myself again when I thought I was lost forever. So, yes, Vincent, I am certain. He kissed her then, properly, for the first time. Her lips were soft and warm, and she tasted like the honey cake they had shared earlier. She made a small sound of surprise that quickly turned into something else, her hands coming up to grip his shirt as she kissed him back with a hunger that matched his own. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said, the words falling out unbidden, but true. I did not plan to. I tried not to, but I do. I love you too, Flora whispered. It frightens me how much. I swore after Thomas died that I would never let myself be vulnerable again, never give someone the power to hurt me like that. But you are different. With you, it does not feel like giving up power. It feels like sharing it. They sat together as the sun disappeared below the horizon, wrapped in each other's arms, making quiet plans for a future that suddenly seemed possible. Vincent would save his wages through the harvest season. Flora would continue her work at the store. In the spring, when he had enough money, he would buy land outside town. They would build a house together, small at first, but with room to grow. They would marry, properly and legally, with the whole town as witnesses. But fate, as it often does, had different plans. In early September, Vincent was working in the north field when he saw riders approaching. There were 4 of them, hard-looking men with dust-covered clothes and weapons prominently displayed. His instincts, honed by years of living on the edge of civilization, immediately went on alert. He recognized trouble when he saw it. The men stopped at the farm, talking to the owner, Mr. Patterson, who pointed in Vincent's direction. Vincent set down his tools and walked over, his hand instinctively checking for the revolver he wore at his hip. He had not had cause to use it in months, but he kept it clean and loaded out of habit. "You Vincent Orson?" the lead rider asked. He was a big man with a scar running down his left cheek and eyes like chips of ice. "I am," Vincent said carefully. "What is your business?" The man produced a piece of paper from his vest and held it out. "I am Deputy Marshal Colt Harrison. These are my men. We are tracking a gang that robbed a bank in Spokane 3 weeks ago. We have reason to believe they are headed this direction, possibly to cross into Oregon. The local sheriff has asked for help from anyone with military or law enforcement experience. Your employer says you were a cavalry scout during the war." Vincent took the paper, scanning it quickly. It was official, bearing the marshal's seal and a description of the gang members. "That was a long time ago," he said, handing it back. "I am a farmer now." "We are not asking you to join a crusade," Harrison said. "Just to keep your eyes open and report anything suspicious. These men are dangerous. They killed 2 people during the robbery, including a woman. We need to catch them before they hurt anyone else." Vincent felt a chill run through him. "How many in the gang?" 6 that we know of, led by a man named Jack Brennan, mean as a snake and twice as fast with a gun. They have been hitting towns all along the Columbia River, stealing what they can and burning what they cannot carry." Harrison leaned forward in his saddle, his expression grim. "Look, I understand if you do not want to get involved. Most people do not. But innocent people are dying, and we need all the help we can get." Vincent thought of Flora, of the life they were planning, and his first instinct was to say no. He had spent enough years fighting other people's battles, but he also thought about what would happen if this gang came to Walla Walla, if they threatened the town and the people he cared about. He could not stand by and do nothing. "I will keep watch," he said finally. "If I see anything, I will send word, but I am not joining any posse. I have responsibilities here." Harrison nodded, seeming satisfied. "That is all we ask. Be careful, Orson. These men do not take prisoners." After the marshals rode away, Vincent stood in the field for a long time, watching the dust settle in their wake. Mr. Patterson came over, his weathered face concerned. "You thinking what I am thinking?" "That we should warn the town," Vincent said. "Get people ready in case those outlaws come this way." "Already sent my son to alert the sheriff," Patterson said. "But it would not hurt to have men positioned on the roads, keeping lookout. You willing to take a shift?" Vincent agreed, though it meant less time with Flora. That evening, when he rode into town to tell her about the situation, he found her closing up the store. She listened to his explanation with growing alarm, her hands twisting in her apron. "How dangerous are these men?" she asked. "Very," Vincent said honestly, "but the chances of them coming here are slim. Walla Walla is not a rich town, and we are off the main roads. They will likely stick to bigger targets." But even as he said it, he felt uneasy. Something about the situation did not sit right with him, though he could not pinpoint what. For the next week, Vincent split his time between working the fields and taking shifts watching the Eastern Road. Other men from town and surrounding farms joined the watch, all of them armed and alert. The sheriff, a pragmatic man named Whitmore, organized patrols and made sure everyone knew to report anything unusual. Nothing happened. The days passed quietly, harvest work continued, and people began to relax. Perhaps the gang had gone a different direction. Perhaps they had been caught by the marshals. Perhaps they were no longer a threat. Vincent wanted to believe it, but his instincts told him otherwise. He had learned during the war to trust that crawling sensation on the back of his neck, the feeling that something was wrong even when everything seemed fine. He kept his gun close and his eyes open, and he made Flora promise to stay alert. "You are worrying too much," she told him one afternoon, reaching up to smooth the line between his eyebrows. "We are safe here." "I hope you are right," Vincent said, pulling her close. "I just cannot shake the feeling that something bad is coming." He was proven right 3 days later. Vincent was riding back from his morning watch when he heard gunshots from the direction of town. His blood went cold. He kicked his horse into a gallop, racing down the road with his revolver drawn. More shots rang out, echoing across the valley, and he could see smoke rising from Main Street. The scene that greeted him was chaos. People were running, screaming, diving into buildings for cover. 2 men lay in the street, one moving weakly, the other ominously still. A wagon was on fire, thick black smoke billowing into the air, and in the middle of it all were 6 mounted men, firing their weapons and shouting orders. Vincent barely registered the details. His entire focus narrowed to one thing: the general store, Flora. He dismounted while his horse was still moving, hitting the ground running. A bullet whistled past his ear, close enough to feel the heat. He did not slow down. The door to the store hung open, half torn from its hinges, and he could hear screaming from inside. Vincent burst through the door to find one of the outlaws holding Mrs. Henderson at gunpoint, while he shoved items into a sack. The man spun at the sound of Vincent's entry, his weapon swinging around. Vincent was faster. He fired once, hitting the outlaw in the shoulder, sending him sprawling backward with a cry of pain. "Where is Flora?" Vincent demanded of Mrs. Henderson, who was pressed against the wall, her face white with terror. "Upstairs," she gasped. She ran upstairs when they came in. Vincent took the stairs 3 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs. He could hear sounds of struggle above, furniture scraping across wood, a woman's voice shouting no. He kicked open the door to Flora's room and felt rage explode through him like fire. Another outlaw had Flora backed into a corner, one hand gripping her arm hard enough to bruise while she fought against him. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, and there was blood on her lip where he had hit her. When she saw Vincent, her eyes widened with relief and fear. "Let her go," Vincent said, his voice deadly calm as he leveled his revolver at the man's head. The outlaw laughed, a cruel sound, and yanked Flora in front of him as a shield. "I do not think so, friend. In fact, you are going to put that gun down nice and slow, or I am going to put a bullet in this pretty lady's brain." Vincent's hand did not waver, but his mind was racing. He could not get a clear shot, not without risking Flora, but if he put down his weapon, they were both dead. He could see it in the outlaw's eyes, the casual cruelty of a man who killed without hesitation. "You are Jack Brennan," Vincent said, stalling for time. "There are marshals hunting you all across the territory. You cannot win this." "Maybe not," Brennan said, pressing his gun against Flora's temple. She whimpered, and Vincent felt something crack inside his chest. "But I can sure as hell take some people down with me. Now drop the gun, or she dies." Vincent met Flora's eyes, trying to communicate everything he felt in a single look. "Trust me," he willed her to understand. "Trust me." Then, moving very slowly, he began to lower his weapon. The moment Brennan's attention shifted to watch the gun descend, Flora moved. She drove her elbow back into his ribs with all her strength, twisting away from his grip. It was exactly the opening Vincent needed. He raised his revolver and fired, the shot so close and loud in the small room that it left his ears ringing. Brennan fell backward, clutching his chest, his weapon clattering to the floor. Flora stumbled forward, and Vincent caught her, wrapping his arms around her shaking body. "I have you," he murmured into her hair. "You are safe. I have you." The sound of more gunfire from the street reminded him that the danger was not over. He could hear Sheriff Whitmore's voice now, calling orders, and the outlaws shouting back. The fight was still going on. Vincent needed to get Flora somewhere secure before more of them came looking. He guided her downstairs, checking carefully before emerging from the store. The street had turned into a battlefield. Sheriff Whitmore and several armed townsmen had taken positions behind barrels and wagons, exchanging fire with the remaining outlaws. 2 more bodies lay in the street, and Vincent could not tell if they were bandits or citizens. "We need to get to the church," Vincent said to Flora. "It has thick walls and a root cellar. You will be safer there." They ran together, keeping low, moving from cover to cover. A bullet struck the wall beside them, showering them with splinters, but they did not stop. The church was 3 buildings down, its doors standing open as people fled inside for sanctuary. Vincent pushed Flora through and turned to help others, pulling a woman with a crying child out of the line of fire, dragging an injured man behind a pew. The battle lasted another 20 minutes, though it felt like hours. When it finally ended, 3 of the outlaws were dead, including Brennan. 2 more were wounded and captured. The last had escaped on horseback, riding east with several townsmen in pursuit. The cost had been heavy. 2 citizens were dead, including Mr. Henderson, who had died defending his store. 5 others were wounded, 2 critically. The general store was badly damaged, and several other buildings had been hit by stray bullets or set on fire during the chaos. Vincent found Flora in the church, sitting on a pew with her arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. He sat beside her, not speaking, just being present. After a while, she turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You saved my life," she said. "You saved yourself," Vincent corrected gently. "That move you made, hitting him like that, it gave me the opening I needed. You were very brave." "I do not feel brave," Flora whispered. "I feel terrified. When he had that gun to my head, all I could think was that I had just found a reason to live, and I was about to lose it. I was about to lose you." Vincent pulled her against his chest, holding her tightly. "You did not lose me. We are both here. We are both alive." They stayed like that for a long time, finding comfort in each other's presence while, outside the town, began the grim work of cleaning up and burying the dead. It was a stark reminder that the West was still a dangerous place, that violence could erupt without warning and shatter the fragile peace people tried to build. That night, after helping with the injured and the cleanup, Vincent took Flora back to Mrs. Callahan's boarding house. Her room above the store was no longer habitable. The walls splattered with Brennan's blood, and she could not bear to be there. Mrs. Callahan took one look at her and immediately prepared a room, fussing over her like a mother hen. Vincent stayed until Flora fell into an exhausted sleep, then slipped out to walk the dark streets. The town was quiet now, subdued, processing the trauma of the day. He ended up at the small cemetery on the edge of town, where fresh graves were being dug for the victims. Marshal Harrison found him there, standing in the moonlight with his hat in his hands. "Hell of a day," Harrison said, lighting a cigar. "Yeah," Vincent agreed. "I heard what you did. Saved that woman and killed Brennan. That took guts." Harrison took a long draw on his cigar. "The territory could use men like you, men who know how to handle themselves in a fight. The Marshal Service is always looking for good deputies." Vincent shook his head. "I appreciate it, but no. I have had enough of fighting for one lifetime." "Fair enough," Harrison said. "But if you ever change your mind, the offer stands." He flicked ash from his cigar. "For what it is worth, you did good today. You saved lives." After Harrison left, Vincent stayed a while longer, thinking about the paths not taken, the man he had been, and the man he wanted to become. He had been a soldier, a scout, a cowboy, always moving, always running from something he could not name. But maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to plant roots and see what grew. He made his decision that night, standing among the graves with the stars wheeling overhead. The next morning, Vincent went to see Mr. Patterson and gave notice. He was done with farm work. Instead, he was going to use his savings to buy the plot of land he had been eyeing, the small piece of property on the outskirts of town, with a creek running through it and good soil for crops. He was going to build a house. He was going to make a home, and then he was going to ask Flora to marry him. Patterson was sorry to lose him, but understanding. "You have found something worth staying for," he said, shaking Vincent's hand. "That is more than most men get. I wish you well." Vincent spent the next few weeks working like a man possessed. He bought lumber and supplies, hired help when he needed it, and threw himself into construction. The house started to take shape, modest but solid, with 2 rooms that could expand to more later. He built a porch that faced west so they could watch the sunsets together. He dug a well and constructed a small barn for animals they did not yet have. Flora would visit sometimes, bringing food and watching him work. The attack had changed something in her, made her more certain, more determined. The fear that had paralyzed her after Thomas's death was gone, replaced by a fierce will to live fully and completely, to wring every moment of joy from a life that had proven too short and too fragile. "It is beautiful," she said one afternoon in early October, standing on the unfinished porch and looking out over the land. "I can see us here, growing old together." "Is that what you want?" Vincent asked, wiping sweat from his face. "To grow old with me?" Flora turned to him, her expression serious. "Yes," she said simply, "if you will have me." Vincent crossed the porch in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion and tenderness he felt. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he kept his forehead pressed against hers. "I will have you any way you will give yourself to me," he said, "forever, if you will let me." "Forever sounds perfect," Flora whispered. They were married on a crisp November day, with fallen leaves swirling in the wind and the first hint of winter in the air. The ceremony was small, held at the church with Sheriff Whitmore standing up as Vincent's witness and Mrs. Henderson, recovered from her ordeal, standing up for Flora. Most of the town attended, crammed into the pews, showing their support for the couple who had become part of their community. Flora wore a dress of dark blue silk, not white because she was a widow, but beautiful nonetheless. Vincent wore his best suit, purchased specially for the occasion, and tried not to let his hands shake as he slipped the ring onto her finger. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause, and Vincent kissed his bride with his whole heart. The reception was held at Mrs. Callahan's boarding house, with food and music and dancing that lasted into the evening. Vincent danced with his wife, holding her close and marveling at how much his life had changed in just 7 months. He had ridden into Walla Walla with nothing, expecting nothing, and now he had everything that mattered. That night, they went home to the house Vincent had built, now finished and furnished with pieces they had collected together. He carried Flora over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the main room. A fire crackled in the hearth, warming the space, and lamplight cast everything in a golden glow. "Welcome home, Mrs. Orson," Vincent said. Flora smiled, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "Home," she repeated softly. "I did not think I would ever have one again. But here I am, with you, and it feels more right than anything ever has." They made love that night with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies, whispering promises against each other's skin. Afterward, they lay tangled together under quilts, watching shadows dance on the ceiling and talking quietly about their dreams. "I want children," Flora said. "I know it is soon, and we have time, but I want you to know that is something I hope for. A family of our own." "I want that too," Vincent admitted. "I never thought I did, never thought I would be any good at it. But with you, I think I could be. I think we could build something good." "We already have," Flora said, snuggling closer. "This. Us. Everything else is just details." Winter came to the Walla Walla Valley with cold winds and gray skies, but inside their little house, warmth prevailed. Vincent took odd jobs in town, doing carpentry and repair work, building a reputation as someone reliable and skilled. Flora continued her work at the rebuilt general store, her talent with needle and thread in high demand, as winter clothes needed mending, and new garments were commissioned. They settled into married life with surprising ease. Vincent had been alone for so long that he expected to struggle with having someone else in his space. But Flora fit into his life like she had always belonged there. She sang while she cooked, hummed while she sewed, filled the house with small touches that made it feel like a home. Curtains at the windows, a rug before the hearth, wildflowers in a jar when the season allowed. In turn, Vincent learned what it meant to be a husband, to consider someone else's needs and wants as equal to his own. He chopped extra wood so Flora would never be cold. He surprised her with small gifts, a book she had mentioned wanting, a new thimble to replace her worn one, ribbons for her hair. He held her when nightmares woke her in the night, memories of the attack or of Thomas's death, and he listened when she needed to talk about her grief. Because the grief had not disappeared just because she had fallen in love again. Thomas would always be part of her story, the first man she had loved, the reason she had come west. Vincent understood that, did not feel threatened by it. There was room in a heart for multiple loves, for honoring the past while embracing the future. Spring arrived late that year, but when it finally came, it brought an explosion of color and life. The creek swelled with snowmelt, wildflowers carpeted the fields, and the world felt renewed. Vincent planted their first garden, teaching Flora how to work the soil, and together they put in seeds for vegetables and herbs. It felt symbolic, putting down roots in the literal sense, creating something that would grow and sustain them. In May, Flora discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent one evening after dinner, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them over her still flat stomach. "I think I am with child," she said. "I am almost certain." Vincent felt his heart stop, then start again, racing. "Truly?" "Truly," Flora confirmed, her eyes shining. "We are going to have a baby." He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen, both of them laughing with joy and relief and the sheer wonder of it. They had hoped for this, prayed for it, but having it actually happen felt like a miracle. After everything they had both lost, they were being given the chance to create new life, to build a family. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Flora continued working for the first few months. then reluctantly gave it up as her belly grew and the work became too physically demanding. She spent her days at home instead, sewing baby clothes, preparing the spare room as a nursery, and writing letters to her family back in Philadelphia. She had reconciled with them over the winter, her mother's response to news of her remarriage cautiously supportive. They would likely never understand her choices, but they were willing to try, which was enough. Vincent hovered over Flora like a worried hen, constantly asking if she needed anything, if she was comfortable, if she should be resting more. She tolerated his fussing with good humor, teasing him gently about being overprotective. But secretly, she loved it. She loved being cared for so completely, loved knowing that this man would move mountains to keep her safe and happy. Their son was born on a cold January night in 1879, arriving with a lusty cry that seemed too big for his tiny body. They named him Thomas Vincent Orson, honoring both the past and the present, and when Vincent held him for the first time, tears streamed down his face unashamedly. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered, staring in awe at the little red face and tiny waving fists. "Flora, he is perfect." "He is ours," Flora said, exhausted but radiant. "Our son." Thomas grew quickly as babies do, transforming from a tiny bundle into a curious, active toddler who kept them constantly busy. He had Flora's gray eyes and Vincent's dark hair, and a personality that was entirely his own. Stubborn, affectionate, endlessly inquisitive. Vincent discovered that fatherhood suited him in ways he had never anticipated. He loved teaching his son about the world, showing him how to identify birds and plants, taking him fishing in the creek, telling him stories at bedtime. Flora blossomed as a mother, finding a contentment she had never known. She still had hard days, moments when grief or memory would ambush her, but they were fewer now, softer somehow. She had learned that healing was not about forgetting or replacing, but about making room for new joy alongside old sorrow. When Thomas was 2, Flora became pregnant again, this time with twins, a boy and a girl who arrived squalling into the world on a warm summer evening. They named the boy Benjamin and the girl Margaret after Vincent's lost love, a gesture that made him weep and hold Flora tighter than ever. The house that had seemed spacious for 2 was suddenly full to bursting with 3 children under the age of 3. Vincent expanded it, adding 2 more rooms and a larger kitchen, working in the evenings and on Sundays, while Flora managed the chaos of toddlers and infants with impressive patience. They hired a young woman from town, Sarah, to help with the housework and the children, giving Flora some breathing room. Life became a beautiful, exhausting whirlwind of feedings and diapers, first words and first steps, laughter and tears and endless love. Vincent had never imagined himself as a family man, had never thought he wanted or deserved this kind of happiness, but now he could not imagine any other life. Every evening, when he came home to find his children playing in the yard and his wife smiling at him from the porch, he felt a gratitude so profound it was almost painful. The years passed in the way they do, when life is full and good. Thomas started school, eager and bright, already reading beyond his years. The twins grew into distinct personalities, Benjamin serious and thoughtful, Margaret wild and fearless. Vincent's carpentry business flourished, and Flora started taking in sewing again, working in the hours when the children were occupied or sleeping. They saved carefully, planning for the future, for education and opportunities for their children. Walla Walla grew and changed around them. The railroad brought more people, more commerce, transforming the rough frontier town into something more settled and civilized. The wheat harvest became more mechanized, the streets were improved, electric lights were installed in some of the newer buildings. Vincent watched it all with mixed feelings, glad for the progress but nostalgic for the simpler times. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent took Flora back to the spot where he had found her kneeling in the mud. The street was paved now, lined with neat wooden sidewalks and gas lamps. It looked nothing like it had the rainy April day, but the memory was as clear as if it had happened yesterday. "I think about that day sometimes," Flora said, linking her arm through his. "How close I came to giving up entirely. If you had not stopped, if you had not cared enough to help a stranger, I do not know what would have happened to me." "You would have survived," Vincent said with certainty. "You are stronger than you know, Flora. You always have been." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Maybe. But I am glad I did not have to find out. I am glad you stopped. I am glad you saw something in me worth saving." "I saw a woman whose heart was still beating," Vincent said, echoing the words he had spoken so long ago. That was always enough. They stood together as twilight fell, watching their town come alive with evening lights, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. From grief and loneliness to love and family, from strangers in the rain to partners in every sense of the word. It had not been easy, and there had been plenty of hard times along the way, but they had faced it all together, and that had made all the difference. When Flora turned 40, Vincent surprised her with a trip to Portland, their first real vacation since the children were born. They left Thomas, now 14, and responsible beyond his years, in charge of his siblings with Sarah's help, and took the train west to the coast. They stayed in a hotel with electric lights and running water, ate in restaurants, attended a theater performance, and walked along the waterfront, holding hands like newlyweds. "I feel young again," Flora said, laughing as they strolled through a park filled with roses. "Like the world is full of possibilities." "It is," Vincent said. "We have raised 3 good children, built a successful life, but that does not mean we are done living. There is still so much to do, to see, to experience." They returned home refreshed and reconnected, ready to face whatever came next. Thomas was preparing for university, already accepted to a school in Seattle, where he planned to study law. Benjamin was showing an aptitude for music, spending hours at the piano they had scrimped and saved to buy. Margaret, now 12, was determined to be a veterinarian, much to the amusement of some townspeople who thought it was not a suitable profession for a young lady. Vincent and Flora supported all of them, encouraging their dreams even when they seemed impractical. In 1895, when Vincent was 49 and Flora 42, they celebrated another milestone, the birth of their first grandchild. Thomas had married a young woman named Caroline while at university, and they had settled in Seattle, where Thomas was building a successful law practice. When word came that Caroline had delivered a healthy baby boy, Vincent and Flora immediately took the train north to meet their grandson. Holding that tiny baby, seeing the love in his son's eyes as he looked at his wife and child, Vincent felt the circle complete. He thought about all the years between the rainy day in Walla Walla and this moment, about all the joy and sorrow and growth that had filled them. He thought about Margaret, his first love, buried in Missouri soil, and about Thomas Lawson, who had brought Flora west and died too young. He thought about all the people who had touched their lives and shaped their story. "What are you thinking?" Flora asked, slipping her hand into his as they stood watching Thomas and Caroline with their baby. "I am thinking about second chances," Vincent said, "about how life can break your heart and put it back together in ways you never expected, about how finding you in that mud was the best thing that ever happened to me." Flora squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with tears. "You gave me my life back," she said. "More than that. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have. You taught me that the heart has an infinite capacity for love, that loss does not have to be the end of the story." They stayed in Seattle for 2 weeks, helping with the baby and enjoying time with their son. But they were glad to return home to Walla Walla, to their house that had expanded and evolved with their family, to the town they had helped build, to the life they had created together. The years continued to roll forward, bringing change and challenge. Benjamin moved to San Francisco to pursue a career in music, playing piano in elegant hotels and theaters. Margaret attended veterinary college in Oregon, one of the first women to do so, and returned to Walla Walla to open a practice treating horses and farm animals. She was unconventional and unapologetic, and Vincent and Flora could not have been prouder. They became fixtures in the community, the couple everyone knew and respected. Vincent served on the town council for several years, helping to shape policies and improvements. Flora started a lending library in their home, which eventually grew into the town's first proper library. They attended church, hosted holiday gatherings, supported local businesses, and helped neighbors in times of need. As they aged, they slowed down but never stopped. Vincent's hair turned silver, his hands grew arthritic, but he still did woodwork in his shop, creating beautiful furniture for his children and grandchildren. Flora's eyes grew weaker, requiring spectacles for her detailed sewing, but she still took on projects, still created beauty with needle and thread. They took daily walks together, their steps slower, but their hands still linked, still finding things to talk about after decades of marriage. On their 40th anniversary in 1918, their children and grandchildren gathered in Walla Walla for a celebration. The house was bursting with people, 3 generations of Orsons filling every corner with noise and love. There were 12 grandchildren now, ranging from infants to young adults, and the chaos was beautiful. That evening, when the party had wound down and most people had left, Vincent and Flora sat on their porch watching the sunset. The same porch he had built with his own hands 40 years earlier, weathered now, but still solid. Flora rested her head on his shoulder, fitting into the curve of his body as naturally as breathing. "Do you have any regrets?" she asked quietly. Vincent considered the question seriously as he considered everything she asked. "Small ones," he admitted. "Things I wish I had said or done differently in the moment. But nothing big, nothing that changed the overall shape of our life." "You? I wish I had met you sooner," Flora said. "But then I think about how we might not have been ready for each other if we had met at different times. Maybe we needed to go through what we went through, to lose what we lost, to become the people who could love each other the way we do." "Maybe," Vincent agreed. "I just know that finding you in that mud, seeing your heart still beating, it woke something in me that I thought had died. You reminded me that survival is not the same as living, and that it is never too late to choose life." Flora turned to kiss him, slow and sweet, a kiss that held 40 years of history and devotion. "I choose life," she whispered against his lips. "Every day, I choose this life with you." They sat together as darkness fell and stars emerged, wrapped in blankets against the cool evening air, surrounded by the sounds of family inside the house. Neither of them spoke about the future, about the inevitable end that came for everyone. Instead, they focused on the present, on the moment they had right now, on the gift of still being here together after everything. Vincent died peacefully in his sleep in 1923 at the age of 77. It was a warm June night, and he had spent the evening on the porch with Flora, as they always did, talking and laughing and watching the stars come out. He had kissed her goodnight, told her he loved her, and simply not woken up. The doctor said his heart had given out, worn down by years of hard work and a lifetime of feeling deeply. Flora grieved, as she had known she would, but it was different than the grief she had experienced when Thomas died. This was not the desperate, drowning sorrow of a young woman who had lost her future. This was the sad but grateful mourning of someone who had been blessed beyond measure and knew it. She missed Vincent with every breath, but she also carried him with her in every memory, every habit, every piece of the life they had built together. She lived another 8 years, staying in the house Vincent had built, tended by her children and grandchildren who took turns keeping her company. She spent her days reading, sewing, telling stories to great-grandchildren who hung on her every word. She never remarried, never wanted to. Vincent had been the great love of her life, and she was content to honor that until they met again. Margaret was with her at the end, holding her hand as Flora lay in the bed she had shared with Vincent for so many years. "Are you afraid?" Margaret asked gently. Flora shook her head, smiling. "No, my darling, I am not afraid. I have had a good life, better than I ever deserved, and soon I will see your father again. He is waiting for me. I know he is." Her voice grew softer, more distant. "Your heart's still beating," he told me. "That's enough." And it was enough. It was more than enough. Those were her last words. She closed her eyes and slipped away peacefully, her heart finally still after 84 years of beating. They buried her next to Vincent in the Walla Walla cemetery, under the shade of an oak tree with a view of the valley they had called home. The whole town turned out for the funeral, 3 generations of people whose lives had been touched by the couple who had chosen to build their life in this place. The Orson children stood together, united in their grief, but also in their gratitude for the parents who had shown them what true love looked like. On Flora's headstone, beneath her name and the dates of her birth and death, Margaret had arranged for a simple inscription. Her heart kept beating, and it was enough. The house still stands today, carefully maintained by descendants who understand its significance. It is a museum now, preserved as an example of frontier life and a testament to the power of love and resilience. Tourists walk through the rooms where Vincent and Flora lived and laughed and raised their family. They see the porch where the couple watched thousands of sunsets together. They read the letters and journals Flora kept, documenting their journey from strangers in the mud to partners for life. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light hits just right, people swear they can feel something in that house. Not ghosts exactly, but a presence. The echo of a love so strong, it left an imprint on the very walls. The memory of a man who stopped to help a woman in her darkest moment, and the woman who chose to live when it would have been easier to give up. Their story became legend in Walla Walla, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the most profound connections begin with the simplest acts of kindness. That reaching out to a stranger, seeing their humanity, recognizing that a beating heart is always worth saving can change not just their life, but your own. Vincent and Flora Orson never became rich or famous. They did not change the course of history or leave monuments to their greatness, but they built something that mattered more than any of that. A life filled with love, a family rooted in devotion, a legacy of kindness and perseverance that rippled outward, touching more lives than they could ever know. In the end, that was their triumph. Not surviving tragedy, though they did. Not building a successful life from nothing, though they did that too. Their real victory was choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. It was Vincent seeing Flora kneeling in that mud and deciding she was worth stopping for. It was Flora hearing his words, "Your heart's still beating, that's enough," and deciding to believe him. It was two broken people finding each other in the rain and realizing that sometimes broken pieces fit together perfectly, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either could have built alone. It was proof that second chances exist, that hearts can heal, that love can bloom even in the darkest soil. Their story ended the way all stories must, with death and separation. But it also ended with legacy, with children and grandchildren carrying forward the lessons they taught, with a community shaped by their presence, with love that transcended mortality and became something eternal. And if that is not a happy ending, if that is not proof that one moment of compassion can change everything, then nothing is. The rain had fallen that April morning in 1878, turning the streets of Walla Walla to mud. A woman had knelt in that mud, ready to surrender to grief, and a cowboy had stopped, had seen her, had offered his hand and his words and ultimately his heart. Your heart's still beating. That's enough. It was enough then. It is enough now. It will always be enough.